Okay, let's get started. I'm looking forward to this. So pawns come to people evolution, as I've said before, is pure imagination. It's science to say that dogs produce dogs, but it's not science to say that dogs, pine trees, bacteria, and whales are related. There's a lot of imagining going on. Evolutionists imagine that mutations make something new and better. Evolutionists imagine that all these small-scale variations will eventually add up to make something we don't actually observe. Time, as I've said before, is the hero of the story for the evolutionist. Evolutionists and Spongebob should start a private school together. This is the perfect way for evolutionists and like-minded individuals to teach each other that dinosaurs and carrots are related through common ancestry. Stay tuned for a thorough tour of Spongebob University. But first, the biblical-based model. Empirical evidence suggests that everything, including all life, is subject to entropic decay. The evidence of entropic decay strongly indicates three very important things. The fall, as recorded in Genesis, was 100% real. Creation and the fall had to be quite recent. Prior to this genetic degeneration, Adam and Eve would have had 0 mutations. The absolute reality of genetic entropy means that goo to you evolution is going the wrong way. Things are degrading. Things are not being taken forward. We observe devolution, not evolution. Looking backward, the sad reality of genetic entropy demands a literal Adam, a literal Eve, and a literal fall. Even looking in the fossil record, we see dragonfly fossils, 3-foot wingspans. We see cockroaches were 18 inches long. We see 8.5-foot centipedes. We see grasshoppers 2 feet long and buffaloes with horns 12-foot horn span. We see beaver fossils that were 8 feet long. Clearly something was different. Look at the megalodon, for example, 80-foot shark. Genetics confirms biblical creation. Modern genetics has discovered Adam and Eve, Noah's flood, the Tower of Babel, and it's written in the human genome. The Bible makes predictions. Looking at the Adam and Eve story and the biblical-based model, we can make numerous predictions. If we started with 2 people, all the people today should have a low genetic diversity. If we started with 1 million people, you're going to have a lot of genes floating around a population of 1 million strong. But if you only started with 2 people, that restricts the diversity today. Over deep time, any large population will accumulate enormous numbers of mutations, resulting in enormous amounts of genetic diversity. This is a serious problem for evolutionary theory because it is now clear that mankind has very limited genetic variation. While the observed low genetic diversity is a massive problem from the evolutionary perspective, this is most certainly expected and predicted from the biblical perspective. From the biblical model, we all come from just 2 people. This obviously means that limited diversity is easy to explain. The Bible predicted this. If the Bible is correct and Adam really is our ancestor, there should only be 1 male ancestor of humanity. The small number of mutations that separate modern men from the sequence of Y chromosome Adam indicates that this man lived in the relatively recent past. Based upon the actual observed mutation rate for the human Y chromosome, studies show that Y chromosome Adam lived just thousands of years ago, and these findings, of course, are strong evidence supporting the literal Adam of the Bible. The mitochondrial DNA, is a little piece of DNA inherited exclusively from our mothers. That means we can build a family tree of all the females in the world, and there should only be 1 female ancestor of everyone on Earth today. The small number of mutations that separate modern people from the sequence of mitochondrial Eve indicates that mitochondrial Eve lived in the recent past. For evolutionists, none of these facts have to be true. All genes should also come in 2 versions. Since Eve was taken from Adam, she probably got Adam's genome, except for the Y chromosome, of course. These biblical predictions are all exactly what we find in modern human genetics. What's the chance of the Bible being made up and the biblical story mirrors what we actually see in human genetics today? Look at Noah's flood, for example. This story tells us that all people should be closely related. It tells us there should only be a few mitochondrial DNA lines as Shem, Ham, and Japheth's wives, and only 1 Y chromosome, since it's only Noah. His 3 sons would have inherited his Y chromosome. And we should have a significant evidence of rapid population growth. It turns out that this too is exactly what we find in modern genetics. This all did not have to be true. Even more predictions. The Tower of Babel account, we have found a single dispersal of all people in the relatively recent past, traveling in small people groups into uninhabited territory through the Middle East. They call it the out of Africa story, but these are all biblical-based predictions. Welcome to Spongebob University. Evolutionists hope, they dream, they imagine. Only the most imaginative of evolutionists are accepted. Requirements for those that believe they have the wild imaginations necessary for enrollment at Spongebob University, just a few of them. You must believe that natural selection and mutations can explain all new innovations, structures, body plans, and novel information, which we actually know cannot actually be the result of natural selection acting upon random variation and random mutations. Evolutionists imagine these things, even though empirical evidence tells us that neo-Darwinism lacks incredible explanatory power in regards to the origin of phenotypic complexity, anatomical novelty, and the origin of non-gradual modes of transition, abrupt fossil appearance, for example. Students of Spongebob University must also imagine that they share ancestry with apes. Grandpa, is that you? Even though all empirical evidence suggests otherwise. How much more time do I have, James?
You've got 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
Awesome. Now here's what the evidence actually suggests. Human chimpanzee genetically identical by 98 to 99%, they'll say. That's based on preferential and selective treatment of data. Cherry-picked data. They use sequences they expect to be similar. What they don't include is non-aligned DNA gaps, copy number variations, and size differences. What's the actual genetic identity? It's only about 88% or lower, which is over 400 million DNA differences that actually exist between the two species. Most or nearly all of the secular research reports on human chimp DNA similarity omit significant amounts of data that do not align with each other. What is the reality? Humans are not apes, and they were created separately and uniquely in the image of God, just as the Bible tells us. Not only does the Bible prove this, but so does the DNA evidence. Y chromosome DNA disproves human evolution, for example. The extensively and remarkably different DNA sequence of the Y chromosomes between human and chimp presents a very serious problem for common ancestry. Given the low level of recombination and DNA sequence diversity on the Y chromosome, the human evolution paradigm encounters a fatal blow and a serious problem. This problem is that the human and chimp Y chromosome should be considerably more similar to each other. If human evolution was true, they should be the most similar chromosomes in the genome because they are so stable. Let's take a tour into the department of dogs, whales, and pine trees. After all, they are all eukaryotes. Embrace that R&raw in you at Spongebob University. This is the type of wild imaginations we at Spongebob University are looking for. Top of the class imaginations. Spongebob University is the perfect school for you. If you enjoy telling people that although dogs produce dogs, dogs today came from something non-dog long ago and far away. Do you believe pineapples and dogs are related to a common ancestor? If so, was that ancestor a pineapple or a dog? And did it turn into something that was non-whatever it was? If you're flabbergasted and baffled by these questions, you may have found your home at Spongebob University, where we reward those with such wild and unscientific imaginations. Dogs produce dogs going forwards, but what about going backwards? If you believe dogs and pineapples are related, then they both at some point had to come from something non-dog and non-pineapple. By now, I hope you've all realized just how much wild imagination it takes to believe in pond scum to people evolution. Evolution imagined that time can solve all their problems. If I told you that Mary Poppins could fly quickly through the air with her umbrella, you'd say that's a fairy tale standing for truth. But if I told you Mary Poppins could fly slowly through the air with her umbrella, you'd say that's not a fairy tale. They hope, they dream, they imagine. Look at this. Look at what they've published in Discover magazine. Discover what? How imaginative you are? Was your ancestor a sea sponge? What are we discovering here? What incredible blind faith the evolutionists have? They'll hide their science fiction-based religion under the disguise of empirical science, but we know better than that, don't we? Evolutionists are confused. Evolutionists have treated two very different phenomena, adaptation to environments and evolution of higher life forms, as if they were the same thing. Evolutionists are confused, as I've said. It doesn't take a genius to see that these are different issues. Adaptation can routinely be accomplished by loss of information. The development of higher life forms always requires a large increase in net information. Evolution is impossible. What do we know in light of the evidence? Rare beneficial mutations cannot and will not compensate for the relentless influx of deleterious mutations. As I've said before, we're going down, not up. Both evolutionists and creationists agree that natural selection happens. Natural selection will only remove the worst deleterious and detrimental mutations and will only amplify the very best beneficial mutations. What does this indicate and suggest? The accumulating damage is largely invisible and unselectable. Evolutionists have to address the key issue of net gain versus net loss. Proud graduates of Spongebob University, for Spongebob success stories, guys, please refer to these men for all the wild imaginative stories any Spongebob University student could hope for. Guys, thanks so much for watching and listening to my presentation.
You bet. So, ending just in time.